Steve Harvey was in the middle of his biggest joke when he suddenly stopped talking. Something in the audience had caught his eye that would change everything. What happened next made millions of people around the world believe in humanity again. It was Tuesday, March 14th, 2023, at the Family Feud studio in Atlanta, Georgia. The energy was electric as always, with Steve Harvey commanding the stage like the seasoned entertainer he was. He had just delivered one of his signature reactions to a contestant's unexpected answer, and the audience was roaring with laughter. But then, in the middle of his follow-up joke, something made him stop mid-sentence. Steve's trained eye, honed by decades of reading audiences, caught something that didn't belong in the sea of smiling faces. In the third row center section sat a little girl who couldn't have been more than 7 years old. While everyone around her was laughing and clapping, she was crying. Not the kind of crying that comes from being overwhelmed by excitement, but the quiet, heartbroken tears of a child who was trying very hard to be brave. Steve's joke died on his lips. The studio audience, sensing something had shifted, began to quiet down. The cameras kept rolling, but everyone could tell that something unscripted was happening. What the audience didn't know was that 7-year-old Lily Chen was attending her very first television taping, and it might be her last. 3 months earlier, Lily had been diagnosed with a rare form of leukemia. The chemotherapy treatments had taken their toll on her small body, but more than that, they had taken away many of the simple joys that should fill a child's life. Lily's mother, Grace Chen, had been saving every penny from her job as a nursing assistant to give Lily one special experience. When she heard that Family Feud was looking for audience members, she had applied immediately. Lily loves Steve Harvey, Grace had told the casting coordinator. He makes her laugh even when she doesn't feel good. But now, sitting in the bright studio lights, Lily was overwhelmed. The noise, the excitement, the unfamiliar environment. It was too much for a little girl who had spent the last 3 months in quiet hospital rooms. Steve Harvey had been performing for audiences for over 30 years. He'd seen crying children before, usually from excitement or overstimulation. But something about this little girl's tears was different. They weren't dramatic or attention-seeking. They were the quiet tears of someone who was trying not to be a burden. Without hesitation, Steve walked away from his mark. The production assistant looked confused. The director started to signal for a break, but Steve held up his hand. "Hold on, everybody," Steve said into his microphone, his voice gentle but clear. "I need to check on something." The studio fell silent as Steve walked directly toward the little girl in the third row. Steve knelt down in front of Lily's seat, getting to her eye level. His famous, loud, boisterous persona melted away, replaced by the gentle demeanor of a grandfather. "Hey there, sweetheart," Steve said softly, though the microphone still picked up his words. "What's your name?" Lily looked up at him with wide, tear-filled eyes. "Lily," she whispered. "Lily, that's a beautiful name," Steve said. "Can you tell me why you're crying, baby girl?" Lily glanced at her mother, who nodded encouragingly. It's very loud," Lily said quietly, "and I don't feel very good." Steve's heart broke a little. He could see something in this child's eyes that spoke of experiences no 7-year-old should have. "You know what, Lily?" Steve said, taking off his suit jacket. "Sometimes when things get too loud, we just need to make them a little quieter." Steve wrapped his suit jacket around Lily's small shoulders, like a protective blanket. The jacket was enormous on her, practically swallowing her whole, but she pulled it close like it was the most precious thing in the world. "Is that better?" Steve asked. Lily nodded, and for the first time since they'd arrived at the studio, she smiled. "Steve," Lily said, her voice barely audible, "my mom says you're the funniest man on TV." "Well, your mom sounds very smart," Steve replied with a chuckle. "But you know what? I think you might be the bravest person in this whole studio today." Lily's eyes widened. "Really?" Steve confirmed. "It takes a lot of courage to come somewhere new when you're not feeling your best." Grace Chen, watching this interaction unfold, couldn't hold back her tears any longer. Steve noticed and looked up at her with questioning eyes. "Sir," Grace said, her voice shaking, "Lily has leukemia. She's been so brave through all her treatments, and she just wanted to see you perform. This was supposed to be her special day." The studio fell completely silent. Even the cameramen, who had seen countless emotional moments over the years, were visibly moved. Steve looked back at Lily, who was now looking down at her hands. "Lily, is that true?" Lily nodded quietly. "The doctors are trying to make me better." she said. "But sometimes I get really tired and sad." Steve felt his throat tighten. In all his years of entertainment, he'd never encountered a moment quite like this. Steve Harvey made a decision that went against every rule of television production. He stood up and addressed the entire studio. "Ladies and gentlemen, I need to do something right now that's more important than any game show," he announced. "This beautiful little girl right here, Lily, has been fighting a battle that no child should ever have to fight, and she chose to spend one of her special days with us." Steve turned back to Lily. "Sweetheart, would you like to come up on stage with me?" Lily's eyes lit up despite her exhaustion. She nodded eagerly. Steve carefully helped Lily down from her seat, and with her mother's permission, lifted her into his arms. The suit jacket still wrapped around her, Steve carried Lily onto the Family Feud stage. Standing center stage, holding Lily in his arms, Steve spoke directly to the cameras. "Sometimes we get so caught up in our games and our shows that we forget what's really important," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "But this little angel right here just reminded all of us what courage looks like." Steve looked down at Lily, who was now smiling broadly despite her fatigue. "Lily, is there anything you want to say to all these nice people?" Lily looked out at the audience, then at the cameras, then back at Steve. "Thank you for making me feel special," she said in her small, clear voice. There wasn't a dry eye in the studio. But Steve wasn't finished. He set Lily down gently and walked over to the Family Feud board. "You know, Lily, we have a rule on Family Feud that families compete against each other," Steve said. "But today I think we should make a new rule." Steve turned to the production team. "I want to play a special round of Family Feud, and Lily gets to be on both teams. Whatever money we would normally give to the winners, I want it to go to Lily's family for her medical expenses." The audience erupted in applause. The production team, initially concerned about breaking format, quickly realized they were witnessing television magic. For the next 20 minutes, Steve Harvey conducted the most unconventional Family Feud episode in the show's history. Lily, despite her illness and fatigue, participated with a joy and enthusiasm that was infectious to everyone in the studio. Steve made up easy questions that he knew Lily could answer. Name something that makes you smile when you're sad. Name something that's better when you share it with friends. Name something that makes someone special. With each answer Lily gave, the audience cheered louder. When she said hugs is something that makes you feel better, Steve immediately gave her the biggest hug he could manage. As they were playing, Lily whispered something to Steve that the microphones didn't pick up. Steve's expression changed from joy to something deeper, a mixture of sadness and determination. Steve knelt down to Lily's level again and spoke into his microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen, Lily just told me something that I think you should know," he said, his voice breaking slightly. "She said she prays every night that she gets better. Not for herself, but so her mama doesn't have to be sad anymore." The studio fell silent except for the sound of people crying. Grace Chen broke down completely. Steve walked over to her and put his arm around her shoulders. "Mom, your daughter is one of the most beautiful souls I've ever met," Steve told her, "and I want you to know that she's not fighting this alone anymore." Steve Harvey made a promise that day that went far beyond television entertainment. "Lily, I want you to know something," he said, looking directly into her eyes. "I'm going to make sure you have the best doctors and the best care available. But more than that, I'm going to make sure you know that you have thousands of people cheering for you." Steve turned to the audience. "I want everyone here to remember Lily's name, and I want you to send her all the positive energy and prayers you can, because this little girl deserves every miracle in the world." The audience gave Lily a standing ovation that lasted nearly 5 minutes. When the episode aired 3 weeks later, the response was overwhelming. The hashtag Lily's Warriors trended worldwide within hours. Donations poured in from viewers around the globe, not just for Lily's medical expenses, but for a foundation that Steve announced he was creating to help other children fighting serious illnesses. But the most beautiful part of the story happened off camera. Lily's oncologist later reported that Lily's attitude and energy had completely transformed after her day at Family Feud. She began responding better to treatments, not because of any medical miracle, but because she had something to look forward to, her weekly video calls with Steve Harvey. Every Tuesday, Steve Harvey takes 30 minutes out of his schedule to video chat with Lily. Sometimes they play silly games. Sometimes they just talk about her day. Sometimes when Lily is having a particularly hard day with treatments, Steve just tells her jokes until she laughs. "She's become part of my family," Steve said in a later interview. That little girl taught me more about courage and joy in one afternoon than I'd learned in 50 years of life. 6 months after Lily's appearance on Family Feud, her doctors delivered news that seemed impossible. Lily's cancer was in complete remission. Her oncologist called it remarkable and unprecedented for her type of leukemia. When Steve heard the news, he cried on live television during his morning radio show. "I believe in miracles," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "but more than that, I believe in the power of love and community and never giving up on each other." Lily's story became more than just a viral video moment. It became a reminder of what happens when someone with a platform chooses to use it for good. The Lily Chen Foundation, funded initially by the outpouring of support from Family Feud viewers, has now helped over 500 children and families dealing with serious illnesses. Lily, now 8 years old and cancer-free, still wears Steve's suit jacket, now properly tailored to fit her, to every doctor's appointment. She calls it her brave jacket. Steve Harvey's response to one crying child in his audience proved that sometimes the most important moments in television happen when you forget about the cameras and just focus on being human. Lily's story reminds us that courage isn't about being fearless. It's about being scared and showing up anyway. And sometimes when you're 7 years old and fighting for your life, all you need is for one person to notice you're hurting and choose to care. Today, Lily Chen is healthy, happy, and still Steve Harvey's biggest fan. And Steve Harvey learned that sometimes the best joke you can tell isn't one that makes people laugh. It's showing them that they matter. The video of Steve stopping his show for Lily has been viewed over 200 million times across all platforms. But more importantly, it's inspired countless acts of kindness from people who are reminded that small gestures can change everything. Because sometimes wrapping your jacket around a scared little girl and telling her she's brave is the most important thing you'll ever do in your career. And sometimes, if we're very lucky, being noticed and cared for by a stranger can give us the strength to keep fighting for our lives. Steve Harvey stopped his show for a crying child, but really Lily Chen saved the show by reminding everyone what entertainment is really about, connecting with each other's hearts and choosing compassion over everything else. If this incredible story of kindness and healing moved you, make sure to subscribe and hit that thumbs up button. Share this video with someone who needs to be reminded of the power of human compassion. Have you ever witnessed a moment when someone chose kindness over convenience? Let us know in the comments. And don't forget to ring that notification bell for more amazing true stories about the heroes among us.